Alright, hello YouTube. Today we will be doing a Sara guide video. I'll be giving all the information and testing of Sara that I've done, and as well as builds, artifacts, weapon choices and such, yeah? First of all, Sara is just a weaker Bennett. She has so many hoops she has to jump through to perform roughly 80% of Bennett's buffing capabilities, and without the healing and the cleanse. But in Abyss you have two teams and you only have one Bennett, so I'd say that is fine, yeah? Not a super strong character, clear rating right now, maybe 6.5 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, roughly, yeah? Let's start with her most important ability. This is where all her values lies, yeah? And it also kind of scales with her burst as well. Right. Her E is Tengu Storm Call. When you cast your E, you teleport backwards and gain a buff for 18 seconds, which causes your next charge attack to fire a bomb, a plant or such, that explodes after a short delay, and it has a 2 block radius, yeah, or like a 4 block diameter and such. With that radius there, you have to be within the radius to receive the buff. So only the character on the field currently and within the radius will receive the buff. And the buff animation is like these crow feather-ish kind of thing flying around you, and the buff will last for 6 seconds. Her E has a 10-second cooldown and a 6-second for the attack buff. The attack buff scales with her base attack. Her E alone, the teleport, does not do damage. The planting the bomb does. Think of it kind of like a Ganyu charge shot, yeah? At level 20, she also unlocks a talent which makes her charge attack comes out 60% quicker. So these are the speed comparisons. As for energy generation, you do not have to hit the enemy directly with your arrow because the explosion is what generates energy. So you do not have to hit the enemy directly. You can see it generates 3 electro particles there. Casting your E alone won't do damage, so it won't generate energy. Hitting the enemy directly is not required. You can just hit the floor, and then the explosion will generate your particles. And there you go. That's the other part. So for Sara teleport, you'll teleport on the opposite direction of where you're moving. So if you're moving forward, you'll teleport backwards. If you're moving left and right, yeah, hold up. And that's all directions, right? But there's also this slight inconsistency that we found. If you hold your E, you kind of teleport in place. So let me try to do it. Yeah. Next is her elemental burst. Her elemental burst drops a lightning strikes and then follow-ups with consecutive lightning strikes, right? Similar to the Abyss Lecter attacks, like the enemy in the Abyss, the Lightning Abyss Lecter, yeah? The only other thing you have to know is it provides the same attack buff with your E. You still have to be within the field though, within the explosion radius and such, right? It has a 20-second cooldown and an 80 cost. And this is where the problem lies. Sara's ER gain can be difficult. It can be inconsistent if you don't know how this works. Because I know a lot of players are playing and they try to aim directly at the enemy, but it's just a lot more consistent. Just aim the floor and let the explosion happen. Once again, as for her ult, when you cast her ult, you do this lightning strike and you can swap immediately for that character to receive the attack buff. As long as you're within the storm cluster damage, you receive the attack buff and it has the same feathery animation. So Sara's essential stat would be attack percentage, yeah? Okay, so all of the storms of your ult increase damage. So these storm clusters where you drop like the bunch of lightning shenanigans, yeah, those explosion also increases your attack. As you can see, I still have the crow feather animation here on my buff. So for Sara's level 70 ability, when her explosion buff an ally or do damage to an enemy, she restores a flat 1.2 energy to all party members every 100 ER she has. My honest thought about this is it's nothing. Like 200 energy recharge, you restore 2.4 flat energy. This effect can be triggered once every 3 seconds, and this will only matter if you have C2. As I will explain later, you can actually kind of spam it a bit. So at 200 energy recharge, you recover 2.4 energy for all your allies. And her last talent, Land Survey. Dispatch Expedition in Inazuma got time reduction, yeah? Pretty simple, pretty simple. As for her talent's priority, you can ignore your auto attack, only focus on your E, and you can even ignore your elemental burst if all you care about is her attack buff, as her attack buff on her burst scales off her E, so you can go like 188, or I would say try to go for 186, just for a little bit more damage on her elemental burst, and that should be fine. I think for this trial rotation, they did a really good job on showcasing Sara, from the artifact set to the weapon choice, and as for the stats as well. My recommendation for Sara would be this. It would just be noblesse set. You can run emblem set or a combination of Thunder Fury Electro set and noblesse set for the extra electro damage and more elemental burst damage with emblem in general. But I would say just run noblesse. I would just run noblesse and be a supportive attack buffer. Her damage is alright, but it's not. She's not a Bennett, right? Like she can't just shit on people, heal, cleanse, and everything, yeah? So noblesse set would be my best recommendation. And as I said, the weapon as well. They picked a super good weapon for this. Favonius Bow is honestly would be the 4-star weapon I would run on Sara, because it allows her to generate energy just by, you know, doing an auto attack or so, and even landing your charge shot into the explosion may generate energy. But do keep in mind that Favonius and Sacrificial only procs if your character is on the field. Let me do an example here. You drop Sara Explosion and you swap. Even if the explosion crit, the Favonius passive will not proc, as the Favonius passive, and as well as the Sacrificial passive, will only proc if the character is on the field when the effect happens. Alright? So for 4-star recommendations, if your Favonius Bow is Refinement 2, you should already... This cooldown should be at 10.5 seconds, which more or less matches with Sara's 10-second E cooldown. I much prefer Sacrificial Bow though, but I think Sacrificial Bow is a lot easier to use if you have Constellation 2, and I'll show that later. Other than that, you can also run Alley Hunter for this passive. The less you stay on the field, the more damage you do. And Stringless, just more damage on your E and your Q. The Alley Hunter at level 90 should have the same base attack with Sacrificial Bow, and since Sara attack buffs scale with her base attack, I would prefer Sacrificial Bow over Favonius, as it literally has like 100 more base attack or so. For 5-star options, you can run Skyward Harp because it has the highest base attack. Amos Bow is alright as well. I don't think it's too good on Sara for the charge attack. Thundering Pulse, more or less the same. I don't think Sara's job is really to stay on the field for that long to go for auto attacks, because she has, aside from her own attack buff, she doesn't have any abilities or, you know, buffs that increases her normal attacks, yeah? So you can't really, well, I guess you can spread yourself kind of thin and try to be a jack of all trades of sort. I wouldn't recommend it though. But the weapon I'm using for Sara for 5-star, because haha, whale account, right, is Elegy of the End. Once again, just because it's more buffing. It's just more buffing. I would be able to buff my allies with Elegy of the End every second rotation. So every second EQ rotation, I can buff my team with Elegy, which is actually not that bad, as Elegy does have like a 20-second cooldown as well. It's just some extra buffing, but that's my preference. If you want more consistency and for a 5-star weapon, Skyward Harp. For 4-star, I would definitely recommend Sacrificial. So as for Sara's Constellation, her first constellation, whenever her explosion hits an opponent or attack buff an ally, the cooldown of her E will be reduced by 1 second, and this can be triggered once every 3 seconds. So similar to this buff right here, where it generates energy, which has the same cooldown as well. This, at C1, she has some extra cooldown reduction. Right, so you can see my cooldown. After the explosion hit, there's a slight animation where it reduces the cooldown of it. That's another cooldown reduction, yeah? Next, her Constellation 2. At Constellation 2, after casting your E, Sara will drop another Crow Feather buff on the field of where you last were before you teleport. This feather does 30% damage of the original feather damage, but it also provides this exact same attack buff. And if you really combine the C1 with the C2, you can go for this.
You really know how to get me going.
And then this. And her cooldown is technically down to 8 seconds as always, if you use it. For the Constellation 1 and Constellation 2, if you use your E, you drop the Crow Feather, get the cooldown reduction, and you hold your charge shot and you shoot right away. You may not get the buff if you do it too fast. You have to put a 1 second delay before your charge shot, because if you do it too fast, as you can see, the cooldown reduction won't proc, because the passive does have a 3-second cooldown. And I would not try to completely make use of this constellation at all times, like at least not on Sara alone. So you can obviously just do this and swap back. And then Sara should use both of her stacks, and that would be nicer than staying on one character. The Constellation 2, that drop does not generate energy. Only your charge shot generate energy. The Constellation 2 of your E does proc sacrificial, but let me try to show the charge shot energy drop as well. Yep, the charge shot also resets with sacrificial. Because her E, her charge shot that she gains, the Crow Feather, after she gets after casting her E, the Crow Feather buff, that bomb that she drops also counts as elemental skill, and this also counts as elemental skill. And sacrificial passive is after damaging an opponent with an elemental skill. So yeah, there you go. Next constellation on Sara. 3, increase the level of your Q, and 5, increase the level of your E. So at constellation 4, the number of storm cluster released by her ult is increased. So from 4 to 6. So instead of 4x4, she released 6x6. And I know the perfect place to showcase this. I feel like I go through more mechanic explanation of Sara than any other in-depth mechanic explanation. Like, even Lisa has less shit than Sara. And I thought Lisa was honestly the most stupid character to explain. Alright, now here are the storm clutter, right?
No turning back.
There you go. So instead of a 4x4 explosion, at Constellation 4, she will do a 6x6 explosion. And against enemy with big hitbox, it's stupid. They'll just take like 36 hits of damage. That's for Constellation, right? And Constellation 6. The electro damage of characters who had their attack buffed by the Tengu Jurai, the explosion shenanigans, have their crit damage increased by 60%. I think the biggest thing is this buff doesn't snapshot. This buff will expire when the attack buff expires, even if you snapshot your Oz. Right, so 20,000 damage on the cast and around 8,000 damage per shot of Oz, yeah? Without Sara attack buff, without Pyro Resonance and such, just raw damage. 30,000 damage, 12,000, 12,000, and then it will go down to 10,000 after 6 seconds, as you can see here. Now the damage should be down to 10,000. And the explanation is, this buff will only ever last for 6 seconds, but Sara's attack buff itself can be extended. Because, well, Oz definitely lasts longer than Sara's attack buff. Right? Which I really hope, I don't know if this is intended or a bug, but I hope they allow you to snapshot the attack buff for the entire duration, you know? I'm sure that wouldn't be too broken, right? You know, I'm sure that wouldn't be too broken, you know? MiHoYo is kinda iffy at times. It's like, hey, we have an idea of how to buff Electro character. We'll give them all 60% more crit damage, but it only lasts for 6 seconds. And it's a C6 of a 4-star character. That's all the constellation, right? So for constellation on Sara, after all these talks, Sara's best constellation, and I would say the constellation you want to aim for Sara, is Constellation 2. I would say that Constellation 2 on Sara is like the same importance of like Constellation 1 on Bennett. You can use them without it, but it's sure as hell make your life a lot easier if you just tap E for the attack buff, you know, and swap to another character to receive the attack buff, and swap to Sara again to drop another buff, right? So it's sure as hell is useful! And that'll be for the constellation, yeah? Other than that, C5 and C6 will be what you want to aim for the extra levels on your E and crit damage buff. There we go. For Sara team's recommendation, Sara has the same problem with Kazuha, where if you were to play them to maintain their buff efficiently, you would have very little time to do auto attack teams. Like very little time to do auto attacks. And this team where a lot of people are trying to go, Sara really doesn't fit well here. Raiden and Eula works well together, but not Sara. Eula ult lasts 7 seconds and she has like a 1.5 second animation, and Sara buff only lasts 6 seconds. So for this team, if you were to put Sara attack buff and then hit ult with Eula, you can see the crow feather animation, right? But the crow feather animation will expire before Eula ult expires. I think the main star of this team is Raiden Shogun, working with Eula as battery as well. I can see this team kind of work if you just use Sara to buff the Raiden Shogun, but not really, right? I guess the other thing would be like Beidou or some shit, but let's go. I'd say any kind of bursty, spammy, you know, EQ comp would work better. So any comp that has just burst ability that you places something on the field or like very fast burst and such would work. The main reason why that Bennett is such a level above Sara is because he's much easier to use, and Sara has to run through an entire obstacle course to do like 80% of Bennett's attack buff. But Bennett can also cleanse you and heal you because he applies pyro to the character on the field, so he is able to cleanse debuff, right? Bennett's buff lasts 2.3 second-ish, so actually his attack buff is like 14.3 seconds and 15-second cooldown. On top of the fact that he can simply just pyro resonance. So if you ever need like massive buffing, Bennett is still the way to go. Sadly, Sara isn't particularly super powerful right now. She's just more fun to play if you like to do lots of different mechanics and such. But yes, she cannot replace Bennett. Not even on the teams that were seemingly, well, good on her. She's just a lot less slot efficient than Bennett in a team comp. That being said, this is my current Sara build. I'm running on a noblesse set with 78, 90, 23, and 46 electro. These are the pieces. I kind of just slap some of Beidou's artifact over. And level 6. Constellation 6. Weapon is Elegy of the End, just for more buffing powers. And the stats are 46 electro damage, 83, 140, and 178. I don't try to make use of this passive too much because it's barely anything anyways. And thanks for watching. Hope you punch the subscribe button, and I'll see you next month.